Good morning. Thank you for the beautiful words of our minister, and only the sensitivity of woman would call Brazilian condition as beautiful. And I think that's really very beautiful, this situation that we have in our country. I would try to speak to you sometimes looking that we are a little bit self-sufficient because our numbers are so big that sometimes I think that we may look like something that is unfeasible. But I think that we are doing what I'm going to try to show to you is that even though it's a very big program for the offshore industry, we can do it. Next, please. As you can see, we are projecting growth to 5.3 million barrels a day of production by 2020. This is a very big growth rate. We are producing right now 2.5 million barrels a day, and we plan to increase our production from 2.5 to 5.3. In Brazil, we plan to increase our production from 2 million barrels a day to 3.9 million barrels a day, which means that we plan to double our production in the next 10 years. If you put on top of that the declining rate between 7 and 10% of the current production, we can show that we are going to have a very big challenge to add capacity to the current capacity that we have with a lot of new production systems. This is interesting because 85% of our production is offshore, which means that really we are a maritime company. And to have this production would require hundreds of vessels, hundreds of floating systems. And these open a very big avenue of opportunities for the shipping industry worldwide. And we think that we can provide a very big opportunity for the shipping industry worldwide. However, we know that some of the critical resources that we need, not only skilled labor, but some of the vessels that we need, some of the equipment that we need, are reaching the capacity of production worldwide today, which means that to meet our requirements, the worldwide capacity must increase. And we want this additional capacity installation to be built in Brazil. We think that we can get the size of our borders to attract more and more companies to move to Brazil, manufacturing, service providing, and research and development to Brazil. And we think that we are doing that and we are reaching this goal in a much faster way than we thought. Not only we have this big production profile, but we have a very big reserve base. We are talking of a company that has now 15 billion barrels of proven reserves. And very soon, we can add, on top of those 15 billion barrels, 5 billion barrels that we bought the right of production from the Brazilian government. And plus, between 10 and 16 billion barrels of recoverable oil already discovered in the current concessionary areas. Which means that we are talking a company that in a few years, with already a known reserves and resources, a company that's going to be around 30 billion barrels of proven reserves. I don't think that there are any other big companies in the world that can present that. Not only we have a perspective for growth, but we have already a very big reserve base. Next, please. But Brazil is not only a big producer of oil, but also a big consumer of oil. Usually we don't see that we are a big consumer. We are the 10th largest consumer of oil in the world. And not only we are the 10th largest consumer of oil, but we are the fastest growing consumer of oil products in the world. As you can see in the bottom graph of this slide, the total consumption of Brazil is growing faster than the US, OECD, and the world. Which means that we need also not only to have production, but to add production capacity in our refining system in Brazil. And we are building 5 new refineries to add 1.2 million barrels a day of refining capacity in Brazil. I think that there is no big oil company in the world right now doing the same thing, to build 5 new refineries in the next 10 years. Next, please. If you look in the world perspective, take into consideration the new oil that is coming to the world, and the world would now needs between 45 and 60 million barrels a day in the next 10 years for substitution of the declining production of the current producing wells. Only for substitution of the current production, you need to add between 40 and 60 million barrels a day from now to 2020. Most of this new production would come from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Brazil. Which means that on the margin, we are going to be the 3rd biggest contributors for the new oil for the world that is coming from now on. And outside of the OPEC countries, Brazil is the first. This puts us in a very big responsibility because we are going to be big consumer, big producer, and the most important outside of the OPEC new contributor for the new production of the world market. The next, please. And as Brazil is far from the traditional routes, I'm trying to present to you some of the routes that we have, long course routes. The shipping industry knows that. And we know that we need more vessels because it takes longer for us to go to the Far East. And today, we are exporting to China oil, and we are importing from India diesel. Probably this is going to change because it makes no sense to keep things like that. But the most important thing is that we are going to have more and more long course trade with oil products and crude oil from Brazil and to Brazil. And as such, the opportunities for very large crude carriers and for big carriers of oil is opening because the new frontier is going to require more and more vessels to transport oil. But not only Brazil is a very big new producer, but inside Brazil, the domestic market in Brazil also requires a lot of vessels. The next, please. As you can see, Brazil is a very large country, and we use a lot of vessels to transport oil within Brazil. Brazil is not a small country, and we require a lot of vessels and a lot of transportation in the Brazilian coastal navigations. Also, this opens very big opportunities for the shipping industry in Brazil. The next, please. This is the most important area of production in Brazil. In the bottom of this slide, you see the area in which we have the big discovery in the pre-salts. In the northern part of that, in the Campos Basin, we have the traditional production of Petrobras. We are producing most of our production now from the Campos Basin. We are producing around 2 million barrels a day in Brazil. Most of the new production would come from from the Campos Basin, but more from the Santos Basin on the southern part of Brazil. This poses a new challenge for the supply boats and for the maritime logistics that we need. Because this Campos Basin production is on average 150 kilometers from the coastline. In the Santos Basin, we are 300 kilometers from the coastline, twice as far comparing to the Santos Basin. This puts a very big strain on our logistics for people and goods because we have twice as much kilometers to transport our goods and people. We are thinking in very innovative ways to minimize the logistical costs. We are thinking in hubs for utilities. We are thinking in hubs for transportation of people. We are thinking in hubs for production and storage of fluids that we need for production. These would require new technologies, new transportation technologies, and new logistics for our needs.